The following is a Comfortably Zoned Radio Network production.
Thank you, Tally Olson. I am back. Lovin' baseball when we were 12 and innocent. My guest is Steve Steinberg, and welcome to the network. First time, Steve.
Glad to be here, and I appreciate you having me on.
Well, it's my pleasure. I kind of have, with first-timers, an interesting way of getting to know you. I know in general that you're a fanatical baseball fan, and I'd like to take you back to when you were 12 years old. What year was that?
For me, that was the year that Sandy Koufax missed half a season and the Giants almost won the World Series, 1962.
Oh, well, I'm a New York Giant fan originally. I followed them when they moved out to California, and in 1962, I was right in my prime of being a baseball fan. I've got a few years on you, so let's talk about that a little bit. Who brought you to your first baseball game?
Well, it would have been my dad, and it would have been, at the time, the Seattle AAA team, and the PCL was Cincinnati franchise. And I don't have a real vivid memory, but I think both Claudestein and Gordy Coleman came through Cincinnati. That would have been a few years before that, probably 58-ish.
Right.
So, yeah.
Was he a Red fan or just a minor league fan? You grew up in Seattle, I assume.
Yeah, my dad was a Yankee fan. I ended up, I don't know if it means a rebellious streak. I ended up growing up being a Dodger fan. And by the way, in 1962, I still remember crying because you know what happened in the third game of that playoff between the Dodgers and the Giants when the Dodgers took I think it was a 4-2 lead into the bottom of the ninth or into the ninth, and they lost 6-4.
I remember it quite well, but I happen to have been ecstatic. And that's what baseball is. It's fandom and loving it and looking back, and that's terrific. Tell me what you remember about Sandy Koufax mostly.
Well, yeah, I saw him in New York pitch a few times, and I guess the first vision that I have, and of course I was sitting in cheap seats back then, so it was from far away, but it was really the way that he extended his whole body when he came forward, and all the power. It wasn't one of those windups that you say, gosh, I don't know where he gets all that speed from. Obviously, he was a very smart pitcher at the same time, but what I saw would be that full body extension from probably looking at his back from the bleachers.
Stephen, what about being 12? As far as my philosophy goes, it's a very important year as a baseball fan because pure fandom as a kid reaches an intellectualism at age 12. And you can look at the game with a little bit of knowledge at that point. What about the game at age 12 do you miss the most in today's day and age?
Boy, I would even go back a little bit earlier than age 12, that age of innocence before you start noticing girls out there. And that's a great question. I think at the time, and especially because I was watching minor league ball when I was a kid, it's just the joy of watching the game almost divorced from the personalities back then. Because especially if you went to a minor league game, you follow the majors, and Dizzy Dean and Pee Wee Reese were on TV on Saturdays. And I remember more just enjoying the game than specific players. And as an aside, Ralph, my first birthday that I think I had away from my family, I was much older. This was about 20 years ago, and I spent the day with Larry Ritter, who wrote arguably the greatest baseball book of all time, The Glory of Their Times. And he asked me, he asked me the question. He said, "What is the golden age of baseball?" And, you know, some people say the 50s, some say the 20s, maybe I'd say the dead ball era. And Larry answered that the way that you're thinking. And I can't remember if he said between the ages of 8 and 10 or 8 and 12, but that was exactly what Larry was getting at, just the sheer joy of appreciating the game.
Beautiful, beautiful answer. How did you get to meet him?
I was started to do some research right around 99, and we connected. I don't remember the first time that we did, but it was a very special day for me. And I was wondering, I'm just looking here. I have a little card. I don't even hand it out really anymore. It's my business card, and it has a quote on the back of it from Robert Mayer, Baseball and Men's Lives. Are you familiar with that book?
I am indeed. That was a great. That book was a great inspiration to me. It was maybe a 200-page paperback,
right?
And I have it somewhere in my library. And it was a wonderful book, inspiration for me to do podcasting the way I do it. And as a matter of fact, you mentioned Ritter. One of my podcasting partners on this station is Peter Golenbach. And he just wrote a book, completed a book in the spirit of Robert Ritter, interviewing players the way Ritter does. Peter Golenbach is my literary hero, and Robert Ritter is yours. I'm sorry, Peter Golenbach is my literary hero. Ritter is Peter Golenbach's literary hero. And the book by Mayer was absolutely, as a matter of fact, that was, my kid was born in 90. So you mentioned 99. I remember just where I was at that point, and I wanted to get in. I wanted to know everything about baseball from the standpoint of being an adult. And that was a great book. So
may I just read a quote from that? The quote that I have in the back of my card here. I think you'd find it would evoke some memories.
Yes, please.
Mayer writes, "Baseball, for those who inhabit it fully, is no mere game. It is an alternate reality parallel to the real world, and it is the touch of the ball itself, usually at age 7, that opens through the palm of the hand the magic entry into this enclosed tunnel of time and history. Inside this tunnel is a roster of hundreds of names that, when merely mentioned, send off sparks like an anvil properly struck, on and on like a timeless ticking clock in an infinite star-filled sky, a beautiful night sky without end."
Oh, wow, what a beautiful quote. Can't top that. I'll ask you, is baseball a microcosm of life, or is life a microcosm of baseball?
Wow, that's a deep question. I don't know. They go back and forth. It may be a circle with arrows going every which direction, but That's food for thought for all of us. It's every event is marked by where you were, the year. My mother was in the hospital. Jim Bunning pitched a no-hitter against the Mets. I would have been there that day. Johnny Stevenson made the last out.
that kind of stuff. These facts just, whatever the situation, baseball, sports in general, but baseball specifically, we just mark it. And wow. Let me ask you this. I've been talking to a lot of people about the pandemic and the baseball people that we've lost recently in the last few years. What was the biggest loss for you, baseball? It doesn't have to be a personal loss with these people, but what hurt the most baseball-wise?
Well, I don't know if it's pandemic related, but just losing so many of these guys that seemed forever young when I was growing up. If you ever come to my office in Seattle, Ralph, I have on a long wall pictures from Sport Magazine that my babysitter, he used to clip, and these go back from the late 40s and early 50s. I have and as you remember, Sport Magazine, unlike Sports Illustrated, would feature people, and you'd have these beautiful color photographs. And I have them on my wall. And when I put them up about 20 years ago, virtually everybody on my wall was alive. And now I'd have to go and pick out the few that are still living. And when you have a cluster of them that vanish in a short period of time, you realize the finiteness, if that's the word, of life. And, they seem forever young. And Frank Robinson, was one of the guys that I grew up just marveling at. And, when they're lost, you realize that just like in life, ball players, like people, do get older.
Well, Stephen, Ozzie Sweet, the great photographer, took most of the pictures that are on your wall. And when I was a kid growing up in New York, they had used magazine stores, and mostly Look, old baseball magazines, and old sport magazines. And we go down for autographs and use the pictures that we got in those old magazine stores, use the very pictures to get our autographs on. And when you mentioned Frank Robinson, I see his stellar self in a color picture by Ozzie Sweet that was in Sport Magazine. My God, our baseball memories coincide. I would love to come up to Seattle.
Yeah,
just to see your living room for no other reason. I drive up Highway 5 like I used to do when I was the Tops rep on the West Coast, giving out $5 checks. And I'd go up to Oregon and Washington and see places like Bellingham, Everett, Salem, and these were first-year stops for future major leaguers, minor leaguers that were just signed. And I'd go meet them and obligate them between the years 83 and 95. So I have some great memories of where you live, going through where you live, and you live truly God's country. It rains a little bit in the wintertime, but great place to live.
Yeah, our summers are magnificent, and I'd probably becoming even better if the climate is heating up there. But the one thing that struck me as you were talking here was when I framed these pictures, and they had been sitting in manila envelopes for decades, they're on a paper that, wasn't real glossy like Sports Illustrated, and they were crumbling a little bit on the edges. And maybe that was a hint to remind me that everybody's going to grow old. So as I framed each one of these lovingly, I had to be careful not to lose too much of the edges of the pictures, because over time, the paper got old, I guess you'd call it, getting old, and put the pictures up, and then slowly but surely the players got old. The only thing that didn't happen is they didn't age on the photographs.
Right. That makes it nice. Wow. I'm reminding myself I have a color picture of Bill Russell with his elbow in my hero, Dolph Chase's face, going up for a hook shot. And I got Bill Russell to sign that picture for me in the days when he wasn't signing autographs for his closest teammates. Sat Sanders would ask him for autographs. He just wouldn't do it. I happened to make him cackle, literally cackle laughing, walking from the Biltmore Hotel to Madison Square Garden with Wayne. He was walking with Wayne Embry. And I knew he had a habit of getting to a pregame early in order to have the time, because his ritual was that he was nervous before games and he would throw up before games. And I stopped him and I said, "Mr. Russell, I know this is ridiculous, but I'm going to ask you to slow down for a second and sign this. You don't have to be nervous. You're playing Charlie Tyree and the Knicks tonight."
Okay.
And
Bill Russell,
he laughed like hell and signed that sport picture. That I had to break in with that, and I still have it. I have it decoupaged to some nice woman decoupaged it for me to a nice piece of wood. Probably ruined the autograph value, which I had no conception of then and don't now. It's autographs are what the worth is to you, which can't be put into monetary terms.
Yeah, Bill, he lives in Mercer Island, Washington, and just recently he put up his entire collection. I think he's almost 90 now, and he's liquidating his memorabilia, his rings and everything. But it's interesting you jump to basketball because of all the players who have died, who had most impact on me, and realizing how short life can be, is Havlicek, because I always thought that John Havlicek would live forever, the perpetual motion guy. And that really was more so than Frank Robinson, I have to admit, more so than the baseball one. Havlicek was the one that hit home the hardest about we're not going to stay young forever.
Right, and for me, and the same token, people we've lost, Sam Jones off that great Boston team. We lost him recently, and that really made me cry more so than any of the others. But all of them, I mentioned it, the COVID thing. I believe the majority of the players that we lost recently were from COVID. I know Tom Seaver died. There were two or three causes, but he did have COVID, and it's a tough world we're living in right now, because we're not only faced with what would be normal mortality for going on, but we're losing people at a much greater rate. And there's a sorrow. I mean, the joy of watching these people, the offset is the sorrow when we lose them. So, Minnie Minoso comes to mind, dying right before getting into the Hall of Fame. And that's a shame. Stephen, what do you do, basically, in life?
Well, what I've been doing for the last 20 years is really doing research and writing baseball books. Lyle Spatz and I have done 3 award-winning books together, and we really go back to people from the early 20th century who really have, been maybe not overlooked, maybe forgotten is a better word. And one of the books that I did on my own is the one that first drew me into baseball, which was the story of Urban Shocker, the great Yankee pitcher who died shortly after posting an 18-6 record for the great 27 Yankees. And, I think about the fact that in the 1920s, probably every 12-year-old kid in America knew who Urban Shocker was. And when I discovered him in a baseball card shop when I was with my son at the time, who was 9 or 10, right around, 1999. Matt was born in 88. And, there's so many shockers still out there. And if you think of these people as stars that are in the universe, but there's just so many new stars that are coming along. The older ones are still there, but they don't shine maybe as brightly, and they deserve to be brought back, and their stories deserve to be told to a new generation. So that's really what I see my role as being, finding these people that have been overlooked and digging into their story, which are really remarkable, and bringing them back to life.
Wow, what a way to go through life. You're blessed. It's Walter Mitty-ish.
Oh, yeah, okay.
It's been a pleasure talking to you and getting to know you. I hope you'll come back. We'll talk about some things that are specific. I got your spirit in my head, and if I might call on you from time to time to guest, it would enrich the network and enrich my life.
I appreciate that, and you've tapped some very cool memories and thoughts. So thank you so much.
Thank you so much, and thank you for listening, everybody. Comfortably Zoned Radio Network. I'm Ralph Tyko. This has been one of the most enjoyable podcasts I've ever done.
Thanks.
Thank you, Steven Steinberg. Adios, everybody. Happy trails.
The proceeding has been a Comfortably Zoned Network production. You are advised to keep your dreams wet, your humor dry, your children and grandchildren out of military recruiting offices and off the laps of clerics who wear dresses. Thank you for listening, everyone. Happy trails.